Welcome to the Scale Tactics Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Sells, a former Army Ranger turned government tech executive and now small business founder, passionate about helping small to mid-sized businesses succeed. Scaling a business is tough. As you grow, there are so many challenges to overcome with things that need to be built and rebuilt to support your growing organization. Often, leaders have to wear multiple hats to support this growth until they can afford to bring on full-time team members who are subject matter experts. While delivery and sales can be the main focus, there are many supporting operations that, if not done right, can bring your team to a grinding halt. This podcast is designed to educate leaders on the different operating principles for small to mid-sized business. We'll discuss best practices and help leaders be more informed as they develop strategy to scale their operations. On our inaugural episode, our guest is Tacy Riehm. Tacy is the founder of Vos Consulting with over 25 years experience in organizational and leadership development. She is a highly relational facilitator, coach, and speaker. For the first 15 years of her career, Tacy was an organizational development consultant for a Fortune 100 company, working closely with leaders to create practical solutions. She then started her own firm, working with companies for the past 8 years from a variety of industries and businesses of all sizes, including startups. Tacy's primary focus areas are leadership development, executive coaching, and keynote speaking. She has facilitated leadership development sessions for new leaders all the way to the executive level on a variety of leadership topics and worked one-on-one with leaders to help them identify specific areas of growth and take action. Tacy has achieved some amazing results to help companies transform their teams and individuals reach their full leadership potential. I personally have worked with Tacy as a coach and as a consultant to scale a leadership development program for my team. She is such a great personality, and I'm excited to share our conversation with you. On this episode, we talk establishing a leader development and coaching program within your organization. Key highlights of our conversation include: leader development is a two-way street that involves developing new skills for not just subordinate leaders, but the senior leadership team in an organization as they morph their skills to the growing needs of the company. We also talk things to consider when selecting new leaders for your organization, what approaches you should take and considerations when designing a leader development program for your organization, and finally, how to integrate coaching, leader development sessions, and one-on-ones into your organization and the cadence that has the greatest success. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a great one. But first, a quick word from our sponsor. This episode is sponsored by Victoso. Victoso is a technical recruiting team founded out of a frustration with high recruiting fees. They use a fixed price per hire model to significantly reduce recruiting costs and protect your budget. Founded by former tech leaders, they not only know recruiting, but have led engineering and product teams, so they know how to find the best performers for your team. If you feel stuck with your current recruiting efforts or are ready to grow your team without breaking the bank, check them out at Victoso, victoso.io. And now, on to the episode. Tacy, thanks for joining us today.
Yes, I'm excited to be here with you.
Want to go ahead and dive right in and really looking at how do you scale culture and develop the new leaders at Echelon across a growing company. It's really easy to 30 because at that point, the senior leaders of the company, you know everyone, you're able to have your fingers in everything. But after about 30 people, it starts getting harder. So you've got to stand up that leadership cadre. But really, that's like the OGs in your company that may or may not have ever had any previous leadership experience. They're getting promoted because they know your company intimately in most ways, but really they may need some love and probably do to be the new front line of your company and scaling the culture with those daily interactions that are going to judge it. So taking a look at things through that lens, what are some of the challenges that you see companies face as they look to scale their culture and start establishing their own leader development programs?
You said it well. So when I work with startup companies, it is exactly right. They've got the folks who are really higher level in that 30 plus people are folks who are subject matter experts who have just gotten where they are because they've put in the hard work. They've been dedicated. They know their craft. Then what happens is you cannot continue to be involved in everything, like you said. So now they've got to be great leaders. They've got to make sure that they're empowering this next level of people that they're bringing in to do the job that they've been doing. And that is exactly where you see the breakdown. So you have people calling consultants like myself saying, help, we have been, growing at 200%. We're in crazy growth time, but now we don't know how to engage the new people that we're bringing on, and they don't have the same values, or they don't
Yeah.
feel the same accountability or ownership as we did, because you just put the last 2 years of blood, sweat, and tears into it. I mean, looking at that, it is really figuring out not how do you make your team smarter. It's how do you bring in leadership skills so you then can create a culture. You didn't have to before, but that's the time where that's the most important.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a great point. We always talk about, well, how do I develop these new leaders? But there's the second facet of, I'm used to being a certain type of leader in this company, and I now have to up my game as a senior leader for how do I lead other leaders,
That's it.
which is, a multifaceted. I think that's a great point. A leadership development program is both upward and downward for as you look
Yeah,
at how you grow everyone. Taking
that's
that
it.
down a level to the individual people, what are some of the biggest challenges you see new leaders face? Let's start maybe with I have never been a leader before, and I was like a senior software engineer, and now all of a sudden I'm a tech leader and engineering lead. What are some of the challenges
Yeah,
that you see people maybe in that persona start to face?
yeah. Yeah, we'll start there, and then we'll move up to
Yeah.
the other folks. The ones that I'm seeing as those new, almost like frontline managers. They were subject matter experts. They're so amazing that we say, let's promote you. And then when we promote them, the things that I'm seeing most is they don't know how to get their knowledge to somebody else, like to
Yeah.
truly coach. They also don't know how to pull back and not be in control of that. So it's a lot of just understanding their job is not to get all the things done. Their job is to help others to do the job. And so it's a whole different shift for them. I think what makes it tough as a first line manager is you just tell people as opposed to really engage them and coach them and teach them and develop them. You're telling them, this is what I've done, go do it. So you have these kind of soldiers that follow orders, but you're not really creating and developing dynamic next line folks. So it's really, I have to work with them on what is the role of a leader. It's not just telling people and managing, this is how things get done. It's really engaging your people and getting their minds to open and asking them great questions and sharing the end result with them, and then kind of co-creating some of the things that you need to. So it's this sense of bringing others on board, where typically if you've been an individual contributor, you've just been thinking, what do I need to do? So now we've got to think, wow, I've got to open that up and look at, who do I have on my team? What are their strengths? How do I get to know them, pull them out? It's a whole different view. And I think we minimize that when we say, you're so amazing, you'd be a great tech lead. Well, maybe not. And
Yeah.
maybe that's not even the desire for this person. I see a lot of new time managers put in a role because it's the next level of management, and it's absolutely not for them. That is not their expertise or their natural desire or aspiration.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. A lot of times you talk to folks and they want to be a part of the company. They want to grow with the company, and they think that the management track is the only way that they can do that, when really, especially in most tech companies, you have the individual contributor path and the manager path that is available,
Yes.
and they get pressured into
Yes.
doing that. And sometimes they're like, well, I don't know this is what I want to do, but I at least get one shot to take a swing. And if I don't like it, I'll go back over to individual contributor. But then that causes turmoil, as you're first
Yes.
starting to like get them into the seat. Let's take
Yes.
that now to the leader of the leaders, the senior leader level. What are
Yeah.
some of the challenges they face?
Kind of two things that came to mind is they've got to be really good at cascading their message to the next level so that they truly own it and get it, and they can cascade it to their next level. So when you are leading leaders, you now have this higher level of, you've got to pull out of the day-to-day weeds. That is one of the most difficult things, I think, in a startup situation. For the top level leaders, they're still wanting to be involved in what brought them originally to create that organization. So pulling themselves farther out to just keep a strategic view and not be in the day-to-day things, and then truly being clear enough by handing the baton quite literally to your next line of leaders so that they cascade your message down. You no longer can be the one word, or only a few people at the top that are able to cascade information. Information has to be cascaded constantly, daily, all the time. And what I watch is the higher level leaders will hold that for an all hands meeting on a monthly basis. Well, that's not good enough. We've got to be handing that off as leader that's under me. Here's the baton. You take it. You are now the conduit, the one who's sharing the information on the daily and on the weekly.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think it comes down to framework, and you can take yourself out of the day to day, but everyone thinks, well, if I'm not involved, my company's going to fall apart. And it's really how do you as a leader construct a framework to provide a method of inspection, whether that's KPIs, a weekly or monthly status update where you still have your eye on the ball, but you're just not doing it every day. You've got the bumpers in place before it gets mission critical. I'm finding out about it. And then same thing for messaging, that cadence, as you said, of what is your framework that's not just an all hands, of clearly articulating your vision and expectations and making sure that you're not just articulating it, but getting that feedback that they understand what it is you're trying to communicate.
And Brian, I think on the other end of that, I've seen you may pull, people may be too involved in the weeds. I've also seen people go, okay, well, I'm going to pull out from that. And then what used to be a really cohesive 20 people, we knew everything. Now you put structures in place and they're so rigid that now there's, the people who are being hired in don't know anything about the company, or people who've been there for a while are like, we used to feel involved and now I can't hear anything about what's happening cross-functionally. So there's kind of this happy medium of how do we still get that communication flow? My point is it's got to change compared to when you were that small group. You've got to build a framework that works for you with 50 people. And then you build a framework that works with 100 people. And it constantly evolves so that everyone still feels a part of the bigger picture.
No, for sure. And that's the beauty of a growing business. You break things, build a new thing, test it,
right?
Maybe fix it, but then it breaks again. So taking a look at traits. So when I'm first standing up that new leadership tier, what are some of the traits that companies should look for when they're trying to pick that cohort?
I think individual conversations with people. So really finding out, what's your aspirations? What lights you up? What do you look forward to doing? Like really understanding the people that are working within your organization. Say if you're looking to create a next tier of leaders, I'd want to make sure that person, that's something, at least, even if they, don't ultimately know, they think that they want to move into some kind of leadership position. That would be crucial. But as you're choosing, there may be people who all say, yes, I want to. The biggest key to me, and I know as I work with other people who are recruiting folks, is coachability, where someone is really willing to be coached, where they're willing to learn, they're willing to take feedback. When you've got people who are open enough to take feedback, learn, grow, be open enough to, be vulnerable to say, I don't know everything. Coachable just means that they're truly open to learning. When we've got people who are posing, like showing defensiveness early on, of like, I understood that, or I got that, or pointing fingers right away, it's that openness that will create such a learner that they can, no matter what level they're in, they're going to continue to be open to whatever they need to however they need to show up for that role.
Yeah, that's a great trait. And there's always those little red flags that you never think about to look for. Like, how do they act when you question them or stuff like that? Because leadership, it's all about reps and being open. And are they going to be willing to, I jacked that up. I jacked that up pretty good. And I need to change and have the humility to change.
That's it.
So now that we've talked about a little bit of the traits and the problems faced by companies, want to get tactical of tangible ways that a company can create a leader development program. Of course, there's multiple facets. It's not just that get together once a quarter. There's multiple activities that have to happen to truly develop and grow your leaders and support your leaders. So what are some successful, or with some of the successful companies that you've worked with, what are different activities you've seen them do to establish a good leader development program?
So I've had the opportunity to work with people who have established leadership development programs already. And I come in and I help kind of tweak it or add pieces to it. And then I've worked with companies that have nothing, just help us. We know we need to develop leaders. What do we do? So when I look at any kind of program, and when I help to design programs, there's a bunch of different ways and different kind of prongs that you look for. One key thing is finding an assessment or assessments that you want to utilize in your organization. So it could, and there's so many great ones. I don't even have to say specifically what it could be. It could be an EQ assessment. It could be a 360, so you're getting feedback from all levels that report to you, your peers and your boss. It could be social styles like a DISC or an MBTI or predictive index, something that gives you and your cohort a good baseline. How do you typically show up? It gives them self-awareness. Some kind of assessment tool where they can learn about themselves. I think that's a wonderful opportunity to just start, right? It gives you places to look at to say, where are you strong? And then where sometimes are you overusing your strengths and they become your weakness? So there's just that. I think self-awareness is a huge component, because then it helps the leaders say, oh yeah, I have some things to learn and here are some key areas. It's not just hypothetical. There's some real data that you get to look at. Another part of it that I think is important is a cohort that you're involved in. So if you're in an organization, you say, we need a leadership development program, I would find an assessment. I would select a cohort of people who are similar in line, meaning kind of similar levels, and then find, maybe it's the most high potential folks, maybe it's, a select group, or maybe it's everyone in that level. But I would look to say, create a cohort, maybe like 20 or less, where you get to have a group together that learns together, that will be potentially reading similar books and discussing those together, having facilitated leadership development sessions together where you learn about specific topics, where you get to grow and talk about your development areas, really creating a space where at their same level, they're learning things together. So assessment to start off, facilitated sessions in a cohort where it's more than one session. And then the third piece, which I think is so dynamic and can be a game changer, is having bits of coaching in between. One-on-one coaching. This can be done by an external consultant. This can be done by internal folks. But as this cohort is learning, as they've created this development plan coming from part of their assessment, as they learn that they've got one-on-one time where they can say, okay, in our session, we were talking about feedback. Here's specifically something I wanted to ask about. I've tried it and here's how it didn't go so well. Or, how would you handle this? And so just that one-on-one attention doesn't have to be a lot, but having a few sessions in between can be a real game changer.
No, I think that's great. I've personally have had two different rounds of leadership coaching in my professional career, and both of them did. I never thought about it, but both of them did start with that assessment. And truth in lending for the audience, Tacy was my leadership coach last year in my last job, and I felt like I was very fortunate in the military that it was part of some great teams, and the private sector part of great teams. And we're always told like, hey, you're crushing it. And it wasn't until later in my military career that I took coaching and those, really took those assessments to heart and realized there's this whole nother, like probably 25, 30% you can unlock by just getting that additional external look at yourself and having somebody to talk to about both your strengths and your weaknesses. But hey, I'm seeing this problem. How can I try to unlock the potential of my team? What can I do better to support them? Would like to dive in on coaching a little bit because there's just so much goodness there. I personally believe it all comes down to reps with leadership. And part of that is reflection, figuring out what worked and what didn't, trying something new, reflect. And coaching is a key piece of that. What are some of the components of making a decision of should I do it internally? Should I do it externally as I'm trying to build this in my company?
Yeah. So, a lot of it's going to come down to what's our availability? Who do we have? What are our resources internally, externally, all of that. Pros of it being internal is that if it's a safe person, if it's a safe space, let's say it's a, human resource business partner, and they see you as a leader, They know the context of your organization. They know what you're facing. They're confidential. They can give you feedback because they see you in meetings and they see how you interact. So having that inside reflection is actually really, really helpful because they can say, hey, in our last all hands, here's what I noticed, right? So that internal piece can be really effective. Where an external person, so that's, yes, amazing. Where an external person can have some areas where it's a little bit easier is that if there is too much of that internal knowledge or sometimes baggage or fear of sharing too much because then you'll know this about me, or fear of being vulnerable within the organization, but can do that with an external person. Or an external person could bring a perspective to say, I don't know your context. But here's a question that comes to mind for me, because this seems a little out of what I'm used to. So there's a way to kind of reflect, not being kind of consumed in what is. It's being able to see what could be or come from a different place. But I would say in coaching or facilitating leadership sessions, you could do a mix of both. There could be internal coaching and then a consultant do some facilitated sessions. It could be internal facilitated leadership sessions and an external coach, right? You could mix it, but where you want to see is what is the dynamic between the leader or leaders and the person internally? Is it truly a safe space? And you're going to have to kind of do some digging to find out if that's the case or not.
Yeah, because I'm not going to want to go to my boss and be like, hey, I'm having this. Yeah, that takes and sometimes it doesn't matter how vulnerable you want to be. That may just not be a good idea to go to your boss and say, hey, I'm struggling with this. Like,
or I feel like an imposter and I don't think that I'm really up for the job. And they're like, oh crap, you aren't, So sometimes it's very smart not to be as vulnerable in certain situations. And so to have that as an outside piece can be really great to say, this isn't going back. And that would be one thing if you do hire an external coach, you want to be very clear on what that coach is sharing internally with the leader of the organization, from the coachee to their boss, right? So that confidentiality, is really clear, so that everyone kind of knows their role.
Yeah, I think that's super huge that you define that, so that way, and it's commonly known that if I'm going to talk to, say, Tacy is not going to go tell my CEO like, hey, Brian's really struggling here.
No, that would really make a tough relationship.
Easy way to erode trust.
Totally. If we're looking how to erode trust, that's a good one.
If I hear you right, it's assessing what capabilities you have internal, what capabilities you have external, and really where can you create that psychological safety that they can have those. I do think it's multifaceted though, as you said. I think still as a subordinate, I'm expecting my superior to help create an environment of leveraging either 360 feedbacks or leveraging our one-on-ones to provide me that feedback. But I know that they're only going to be able to give me maybe 15, 20% of what I need, just because either the viewpoint they have or what I'm willing to share with them, where an external coach, either external to my leadership bubble, can really be helpful. So looking internally to your company and find out, because everyone thinks that coaching is extremely expensive, but really in the grand scheme of things, it's not that bad. I mean, what are the typical ranges for a coach to come in?
That's a tough one, because there's some people who are coaching at a level that's like, I don't even understand. I mean,
Marshall Goldsmith is like hundreds of thousands of dollars, but
so, that is not my clientele. I don't want to, but you can find someone. It really depends. It's typically where it's a couple times a month for an hour. Typical range is going to be somewhere between 300 to 500 for a session. You may have some that you can find for cheaper. The point here is you could do a 6-month session or a 3-month session, meaning 6 individual sessions, and have major progress. If you had leadership development program, I've seen some, and I've been a part of some, where you have sessions of leadership cohort sessions, and then you have 3 different coaching sessions. That's it, 3. But they're very targeted about the assessment, targeted about what you're learning. And so it's almost figuring out what's the best way you could sprinkle those in. And It is different. I'm glad you brought up that their leader should be coaching them. So coaching is just developing, right? Asking great questions and developing. They should be getting that, right? From every leader. And then an outside coach is a very intentional time where it is not as tactical. What did you get done? How's this working? It's taking a little bit of a higher view. It's that developmental view to ask the questions that will help you unlock things that are important for you. So it is multi-pronged. You would hope that you're getting it kind of from both ends.
I've seen companies that offer it at all levels of their company. It just depending on seniority. Non-leadership level, you get 3 or 4 coaching sessions a year. If you're this
That's
leadership
it.
tier, it's 6. If you're like a vice president, you get 12,
Yep.
And if you think at even several $100s a session, that's, only a couple $1,000s per leader across your
Yeah.
company, but the return on investment is exponential as
Is
you start.
exponential. And the more you, if it is external, the more you use that person, the more they do understand your culture and your context. So I think I'm always more effective when I have done some more work or I'm working with a few other coachees or doing some facilitated sessions, because then I get to know what's the company about? What are they up against? It just gives me more ability to ask better questions.
And in terms of coaching and external coaching, it's very personality dependent though, too, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
so do you see companies typically try to bring on a couple coaches so that way different populations can resonate with different folks? How do you see trying to blend the personality match to
Yeah.
create that comfort space?
I think that's a great question because not everybody is looking at that. And I think that's really important. What I will typically do is if I'm potentially going to be coaching someone, I'll always do just a consulting quick 30-minute get to know you, right? Where we just get to know one another. I walk through how I work, what I would be asking, what a typical session would be like. And we're just doing kind of a speed dating to say, does this make sense to you? I encourage the companies to have them look and meet with a few other people so that out of 3 people, it's typically the level that it'll get. They'll meet with 3 different coaches and say, you know what? This person's approach made sense to me, or how we just connected more. I think I would be able to connect, or their background is a lot of what I'm looking to understand. So I love when I've been kind of put out there with other coaches as well, just so I know it's a fit and that coachee feels like they've made some decision in it, right? That part of
Yeah.
it is like they're owning it, and that they're saying, hey, this person resonated most with me. I'd like to move forward with them. So in any organization, if you have a few to choose from, I think that's really smart.
Yeah, I think it's huge. I've seen it. Like the first coach I worked with in the Army, we didn't connect, we didn't gel.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel as comfortable sharing. And then the second one I met with, she was awesome, knocked it out of the park. And I
Yeah.
think that's important within a company. I've seen when companies are rolling it out, there's usually an intake to try to help pair them with a coach that best fits their personality instead of
That's
just
right.
saying, oh, if you want coaching, you're going to automatically talk to this person.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think if you're rolling that out
Mm-hmm.
in your company, get a couple coaches, that
Do.
you can work on contract and find a way, whether one of them takes lead or somebody internally within HR or another pin the rose on somebody, they're helping do some
Yeah.
type of assessment to pair or allowing each one to meet, rotate through to find who
That's
they
right.
connect with.
I'd also say, in terms of that, the other piece for coaching, if anyone's thinking of creating a coaching program, coaching for me is not something that I will do if someone is on a performance improvement plan and I'm brought in to see if they should stay there or
Oh,
not,
yeah.
or if they're going to. I've had people ask me, hey, we think they're on their way out. Do you mind coaching them as like a last ditch effort? And my answer is always no, because that's not something that I want to get involved in. That is something that is very much contextual for where they are. I don't want to be a disciplinary action, and it has been used as that so many times in people's lives that they see coaching sometimes as a discipline or what have I done wrong. So I always start out with, I have been brought on because you are being developed, because you are high potential, because they want to really make sure that they're investing in you, and I wouldn't take this if it was anything other. So I
Oh,
dispel
yeah.
some of that initially, because a lot of people still think it's like a hand slap if you're getting a coach, when it's really not. It's the opposite.
Oh, that's a great point. I think if you're talking about coaching in a PIP situation, the person you should be coaching is the leader that's been put over the person for the PIP. Like, how can I be the best
Exactly.
leader to them to try to improve them? Um,
That's right.
and yeah,
That's
you
right.
bring up a great point is overcoming that stigma is, that's one thing I always encourage and recommend too, that encourage others to share their experiences with coaching. Cause I mean, I imagine
Yeah.
you've seen a stigma amongst your clients of wanting to talk with you at the start.
It's important to just get that out of the way. And then I've had great coaching experience myself. I've been coached, and I will share what I've learned and these ahas I've had in my career because of it. So just to really humanize it and make it normal. But 8 years ago, I went out on my own, started a consulting firm called Vos Consulting. So that means you in Latin. And the reason I did that is my tagline is it starts with you. You made me think of this because many times when someone will call me, it'll be like, hey, my group of managers, they're not so great. Fix them. Or I have this person, I don't know, can you see if you can coach them? And what I try to do is I try to help the leader of those people look in the mirror and say, what have I been doing or not doing to allow this to happen? How it starts with me as the top leader. What have I been doing or not been doing? So then we can kind of identify, yes, your people may need help, but it really does start at the top.
Yeah. And I think it's helpful that they know that you're seeing somebody. I intentionally
Yeah.
shared my last command position in the military. I shared with our entire formation of leaders. I was like, hey, I see a coach every 3 to 4 weeks, have been for the last 6 months. And like it's okay.
Yeah.
You don't just have to go there because you're in trouble.
No,
It's like, in fact, like you're missing out if you're not.
that's it.
So,
It's like the only space where it's all about you for an hour
yeah.
and it's completely focused. And it's like you've got a thought partner, someone to
Oh,
just
yeah.
ideate with you. And so, yeah, to be open like that is so helpful.
Oh, yeah. In terms of consultants and screening, so, of course, there's a
Yeah.
ton. There's a ton of
Yeah.
consultants. As with any industry, there's a lot out there. What are some considerations? What are some questions you should be asking when screening a consultant or a group of consultants to come on board with your
Yeah.
company?
A couple things that come to mind. One is making sure, asking how many opportunities or how many, it has to be meetings, but connection times that you would have, that they would have with you and your company. So if you're saying for a consultant, it's just they come in, they only meet with that one person. What I would want, if it's coaching, I would want to make sure they want to learn more about the culture. They want to learn more about the company. They want to meet with that person's boss, maybe with human resources. They want to align in the development strategy for that coachee, that they would have check-ins in between or afterwards. So kind of that like full service of having connections and meetings outside of coaching, to make sure that everybody's aligned. I would really want to make sure that your consultant is open to having extra consulting time or open to further discussions. Other thing that comes to mind for a consultant is you want to make sure if it's someone who's going to come in to help you with a leadership program. I know what's really important to my clients is that what I will do is customizable. So if a consulting group says, we've got this off the shelf, it's going to work, we know it'll work, we actually don't care what your systems are, or how you do your reviews, or how you hire, we're not going to incorporate that, we're just going to use what we use, or use the assessments you use. Work with someone who's going to customize for your group. So when I show up and I'm doing a facilitated session, we get to talk about their systems, how they work on things, what we use their assessments that they seem, the tools that they like and use. Kind of customize the content towards your client. I see how there's rigidity out there, and that would be one that I would just make sure that they're open to customizing. The other thing is, and this is something I offer, some people love it, some people could care, is that if you want a program designed, do you want to own your program? Some consultants will not allow you to own the content of that program. Other
Oh,
consultants, like
gotcha.
myself, you can buy the content. So let's say, Brian, if you're like, I'm going to do this program and we're going to do this. We're growing so fast. We're going to have to run this program, a 6-month program, concurrently or 4 times a year or something. And you have internal people who could run that and facilitate that moving forward. You'd want to buy that so that cost-wise, that's going to make a ton of sense. Or if it's like, gosh, we do not have anyone who could run it. We're just going to do 1 program a year or 2 programs a year. We just want you to come and facilitate. Great, then don't spend the money on buying the content. But those are things that a consultant would really kind of customize. What are your needs? How do we use your dollar best? And that's what I'd want to make sure that you would be getting, is what works best for your organization, no matter how small it is.
Now, I think you bring up a great point there, customization. And that's, nobody's going to love it better than you do, or love your company better than you do. And one of the biggest mistakes I've always seen is I can just write a check to somebody, they're going to come make all my problems go away. And really, it's that you've got to do that first part of sitting down with the consultant and saying, hey, what are we actually trying to achieve? And it's okay if maybe you don't know, but I think you've got to take that time to sit down with whatever consultant coach you bring in and say like, hey, what are high level the objectives? Tactically, how are we going to execute that? And then go on and build, instead of just saying like, hey, give me the cookie cutter model, like you say.
Yeah, the handing over is easy, right? Like you take it, you do it. The problem is if you have a consultant come in and do those things, and then within your company, you are not backing those things up by leadership, one-on-ones, messaging, then it's going to lose steam. So you're exactly right. There's got to be a partnership between the consultant and the leaders within the organization, that this is going to be promoted, talked about, lived out, modeled, discussed, brought back up. Yeah. So it's not just during those sessions or that 1 coaching session or 3 coaching sessions. It is something that is really becoming a part of that company.
And let's say I was wanting to reach out to you and I'm like, hey, I want to create a leader development program for my company. What are some of the initial questions you'd be asking me to think through tactically what that should look like as we build out the service offering?
I'd want to know what levels there are in the organization. So from C-suite, who do we have involved there? What's their openness to being a part of this? What's their awareness about it? The more I consult, the more I'm learning, and this is from failing too, that I have to get the higher level folks involved, or make sure there's an openness that for them to model it at the very least. So those are big questions I have at the beginning. Who's this coming from? Who's going to own this? If this is only something the consultant will own, or maybe one person in HR will own, that's not going to be very effective. So really getting a sense of who do you have? Where's it coming from? What are we wanting to achieve? What does your company have to achieve in the next year in order to be successful? How do we run a plan, a development plan, or a leadership program that would really go alongside what you're trying to do? If you're trying to scale and you're trying to grow, and what are some key, communication is going to be some key things that those leaders need to understand. Feedback is going to be hugely important. Operationalizing a lot of their leadership, making sure that it gets on the calendar. Those are going to be things that are really important. So I start with kind of who are your leaders? What are the different levels? And then might there be a way for us to all engage in some way? So what I try to do is say with the top level leaders, let's just say they're so important and so busy and so amazing that they can't go through the length of this program. I will ask, could I have a short period of time to walk through what I'm going to be walking through with your leaders that are down the line from you? Can we meet? It's like a speed session, right? It's faster and you're absorbing it quick. But the idea is, are you going to be on board and model? That's my biggest thing. So I'll try to have the highest level at least in on, this is what I'm walking your people through, and here's what I need from you. Then I'll have sessions with the actual identified group, and then we'll continue to connect with that leadership group to say, how are we driving it? How is that working? So that we're all involved. I've got a couple companies that I've worked with where it has just been so fun to see the top level leaders, mid-level leaders, now down to first line leaders. We all have them speaking the same language. They're doing the same assessments. We have some of the same models that we're talking about when we give feedback or when we coach, and they're able to really understand one another. And it is happening like from top to bottom. They're speaking the same language and prioritizing development. So I've seen it work, And it's so exciting when it does.
About how long do you think it takes to start getting that traction in an organization? Because this stuff doesn't happen overnight.
Mm-mm. It's a long game. So, if you were, working the companies that come to mind, I've got a couple in my head, two specifically, and it's taken a few years, right? Like to really see it,
Yeah.
because you start and you're like, here's what we're going to do. And then you kind of fumble a little bit. You've got your first cohort, which is great. And then we figure out, how do we keep that moving? And then you've got another cohort. Well, if you do a good job, you pull in some of the people from the past cohort to come and share their learnings, and you keep that cadence of communication from the top moving. Give it a couple years, and you've now had several groups, new leaders, they're all kind of brought into the same thing. You see that we are, decisions are made faster, trust is being built, engagement, people feel involved in things, they feel a part of the company and not separate from. So you're really getting higher results ultimately because you can work. That's kind of the velocity at which you work is faster because of that trust and because of that kind of that emotional intelligence you've put into that culture.
How many touch points were you typically seeing it took per month or per year to be able to get to that velocity? Because I imagine it's more than just, we're touching this once a quarter with an all hands or something like, or a leader all hands.
That's, I take a big breath. There's a lot of touch points. And so let's say for me as a consultant, the touch points typically are somewhere between every 3 to 4 weeks. So let's just say monthly. We're having a cohort, right? 20 and under, connect and meet once a month. What's fun post-COVID is I'm seeing in person and then virtual. In person, virtual. You're saving money, you're saving time. And you're still building that connectivity with those folks. If it's all in person, great. But I'm just seeing some more opportunities. Once a month for sure. And then have it connect where you're talking about a topic and then you come back and say, how did that go? Right? So that month is served with try it out. Then there might be in between there might be 3 or 4 coaching sessions. This might be over about a 6-month period. Could be 8-month period. What I find is the longer you go, if it's a 12-month period, it feels a lot like, hold on, let me get my bearings. So what I've typically done is about a 6-month program where people can go, I got it. I'm committed. I'm going to work hard towards this. We come at the beginning, we set up what is their development plan. Their manager's in on that. We've got monthly meetings. There's a few coaching sessions of one-on-one. Bosses, their managers are following up in their one-on-ones with them. And at the end, we come away with, what'd you learn? What'd you do? How'd you change? How did you kind of tweak your game over these last 6 months? That's typically how it's gone. And then the next year, we commit and come together and have done a level 2 of it's different topics, but we're meeting again. And maybe it's just 3 months, but it's checking in to say this is a continual learning. And then we've got the next group that comes in after that.
Yeah, I think that's a great picture. If it's separated by too much, you're spending too much time trying to recalibrate. I mean, if you think, what does that coaching session look like if we haven't talked in 60 or 90 days? You're spending the first half of that just getting everyone up to speed. And if it's a 30-minute coaching session, you've blown the first half. Yeah. I think you brought up a great facet there. And that's, a final kind of question topic of the day is there's the coaching piece where you have, whether you're internal, external person or combination thereof, that they're the one tactically executing day to day. But then there's that manager interaction, that one-on-one. It's like if I'm in the program, I'm still having my one-on-ones with a manager. In a good leader development program, that person is part of my learning and development process and tying in what I've been learning into our one-on-ones. Is that just a couple questions? How do you bring the leader program into the one-on-ones with your manager?
I look at it where it's myself, a consultant, the person, the participant, and their manager. We are the 3 partners in this thing. If we are to be most effective, all 3 of us have to be going towards the same thing. So and that's why I love to start with an assessment. I love to create a development plan and have that participant connect with their boss to say, here's what I'm taking away from this assessment. Here's what I think are critical things for me. They've got to get buy-in from the very beginning from their boss to say, yeah, I agree. Those are critical things. Let's figure out how to do it. So now my ask when I do meet with the leaders of the participants is that when you meet with them in your one-on-ones, whether it's every other week, once a month, whatever your one-on-one cadence is, be every single time check in, how are we doing on our development areas? That's going to be specific to their people. So it is as easy as could be. Talk to me about what you've done. How's it going? What are you learning? What support do you need from me? How has that changed? The culture in your own team. I always am asking them, ask what and how questions to your people around those specific development areas so that it is no question what they're trying to develop. And by the end, they're able to say, here is what I've seen, here's what I've done, but they need to be coaching in between and just asking, how's it going? What are you seeing? What are you doing? Each one-on-one.
That's great. Boom. That's gold right there.
Right. Well, Brian, it's because it doesn't happen. And, it's like, if it happens, I've seen it. It's the most amazing thing. If you have managers on board with me and the participant, we can do anything.
And it doesn't even have to be that they're having a separate session with you. As you highlighted, it's maybe there's an email, maybe it's once a quarter or once even every 6 months where you're having maybe that talk with the coach. But after that, it's just being present and being intentional with your direct report and saying, hey, what is your develop? Like, what goals have you set out? Let's look at this. Just ask those how and what questions. And that thing can continue to evolve. You don't have to have this like formal sit down again, like, well, let's re-talk about your priorities. Like by just asking the how and what's, that will continue to evolve. And you don't have to have this heavy-handed program over top of you to make it happen.
That's the key, Brian. If we can operationalize this into things that are already happening, you'll get it done. So if it's for every leader of a participant in your already existing one-on-ones, connect with them, the already existing ones. Make sure now you're asking them about their development plan. And if you have any feedback for them, because one of the things that they wanted to be was more approachable or facilitate, better sessions where they're asking questions. If you have feedback for them, it's time to give it to them. So it's just like, find your spot and then just put it in what's already happening. And if you don't have a spot, well, we got to create one.
How are you creating that as part of your program? How are you building in those questions? All things you should be asking your consultant as you're trying to build those in. Go ahead.
One last thing.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, if you're sitting looking at this and saying, are we ready for a development program? I would start, like if I'm an internal person saying, I want to scale, we need something. What I would look is, are our top leaders open to this? Do they see the reason? Have I created a case for it? Does it sound just like HR stuff you're supposed to have? Or have I been able to make a case to connect it where they really see we can't not grow our leaders? So if I'm that person internal, my job is to figure out how to build the case. Now, then you can shop around and say, who's going to be the right mix? Are they going to customize it? How do we want to do it? What's our budget? All those things. But there's organizational readiness. If your top tier level people see it as just to check the box, it's going to be a grind the entire time. Mm-hmm. And so you kind of think about, if that's my role, how do I build the case to where they're with me on it? And so that we can really move forward and find a consultant that meets our specific needs.
No, for sure. You got to be all in, or you're just wasting money and time along the way. Yeah. So Tacy, appreciate you coming on today. If people would like to connect with you on the outside, where can they check you out? Where can they find you?
Yeah, probably the easiest is just my website. So it's Vos Consulting, VOS consulting.com.
Well, awesome. Thanks. And like I said, Tacy has been a leadership coach for me and truly phenomenal. So check her out if you're looking in the market. And thanks for coming on. Appreciate it, Tacy.
Great. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks for listening to our inaugural episode. I'm super excited to share my conversation with Tacy and hope that it provided some great insights as you look to grow your team. Leader development is a long game, but I truly believe it is the competitive advantage of any organization. I'd love to keep creating and sharing this kind of content with you. If you could help me out, please like and review this podcast and share with one person in your network who you think would enjoy it. Our goal is to release episodes every 2 weeks, so stay tuned for our next episode where I meet with Jessica Dubois and talk healthcare plan structures. Until next time, happy scaling.